Howdy everyone, and welcome to the Serial Geek TV YouTube channel. My name is James Eatock, and today we're going to take a look at an individual that emerged from the 1980s animation industry to become one of the most influential artists in the decades that have followed, Peter Chung. If you've watched enough videos on my channel, you'll hear certain names that pop up from time to time. Names that may not be too familiar to everyone, but important names nonetheless. And that's what I've always attempted to do with my channel since the very beginning. Showcase the talent that brought so much of what we love to life. Firstly, I'll just give a very brief bit of background on Peter Chung. From 1979 to 1981, Chung studied at Cal Arts, where many people who wound up in the animation industry would train. His talent was evident early on, as it was and to this day is, unlike so many of his peers. His animation style, movement, timing, character design, it's all just so unique. Within months of his education ending at Cal Arts, he was hired by Disney to work on developing feature films. I would call that a rather fantastic hire on the part of Disney. However, with Tron faltering at the box office, Peter Chung left Disney and by 1984 was working at Marvel Productions, primarily on a show that featured some robots in disguise. That's right, check out the end credits for the first 2 seasons of the Transformers, and there is Peter Chung's name. I'm going to jump forward for a moment and stress that I'm a huge fan of Aeon Flux, especially the original shorts, and was fortunate enough to see it air as part of Liquid Television over here in the UK on BBC Two back in 1991. The following day at school, my friends and I were all talking about it because it was unlike anything we'd ever seen at the time, especially with regards to US-based animation. It's kind of crazy to think that it was shown at 7 PM. Seems like it should have aired a lot later, given all the violence and blood. Especially in that grisly, heart-wrenching second short. The reason I'm jumping briefly to Aeon Flux, who at some point I will cover in a lengthy video on this channel, is that going back and looking at the original Transformers miniseries, Peter Chung's style is wonderfully evident, primarily with regards to his use of angles and space. And nowhere is his style more evident than in the Transformers the movie. You see, that wonderful spectacle that is still celebrated to this day by generations of fans was pretty much visually staged by Peter Chung from start to finish, as he was the primary storyboard artist for the movie. Seriously, many of those classic scenes, yes, Optimus Prime charging into battle against the Decepticons, was storyboarded by Peter Chung. Of course, he had numerous character designs by Flo Roderi to hand, so didn't have to worry about designing new characters whilst illustrating, but still, much of what we love about the movie, visually, we owe to Chung. All I can say is I hope he was well paid for that job. One of the things that is quickly evident with Peter Chung's style is his use of angles. And no, I'm not talking about simple upshots. I'm talking extreme angles and extreme close-ups. Not in the classical Sergio Leone kind of way, but, well, look at this shot from Aeon Flux. You're rarely, if ever, going to see this kind of angle in a typical animated cartoon from the 1980s or even 1990s, unless Peter Chung worked on it. I would talk more about his work on the Transformers and the animated movie because it is so damn impressive, but we'll come back to that another time. For now, let's jump to the reason why we're here: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, as I've told you before, when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles aired over here in the UK, it was edited to become Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. The series debuted in the UK with the 2nd season episode Return of the Shredder. Now, even back then I would do my best to look at the end credits. Admittedly, I was always looking at the voice cast because I always loved seeing those familiar names like Optimus Prime himself, Peter Cullen. A year or two later, a special combining the first 5 episodes into a mini movie was aired quite randomly on one of the UK Sky satellite movie channels. Some edits were made to ensure that Michelangelo was not shown with his nunchucks, but the introduction sequence, with a few edits here and there, remained intact, as did the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme song and logo. But I remember seeing the design of this character, whom April interviews within the first few minutes of the episode, and thinking to myself that it looked very much like a character that would appear in Aeon Flux, especially when you look at the hair. I knew the name Peter Chung at this point, and sure enough, there was his name in the end credits for the first season. Then it slowly dawned on me. Did he direct the introduction sequence? There was a reason the seeds of this thought were already in my mind. Although never aired on terrestrial TV in the UK, the geek cartoon Cops had a few random episodes released on VHS, often by Tempo Video. The introduction for Cops was, well, a thing of beauty. It starts off wonderfully slow and then kicks into gear. Although I saw Cops before Aeon Flux, when I went back to watch Cops, I couldn't help but notice certain extreme angles like this and this that reminded me of Aeon Flux, and one design is Peter Chung through and through. You cannot deny this. The wonderfully named Misdemeanor. You can just see that character popping up in the world of Aeon Flux. Sadly, on the episodes of Cops I saw, Chung's name was not present. It's on some episodes but not on others. So I couldn't confirm that he worked on the show. Hell, I couldn't even confirm that he worked at Geek prior to the internet. Incidentally, back in 2008, when I worked on the material for the Real Ghostbusters DVD box set for Time Life and got to meet many wonderful people that worked on the series, at one point I was conversing in the green room with Dan Reba and Kevin Altieri, and they were singing the praises of Peter Chung, and we were all in agreement that it was a shame that he never worked on the Real Ghostbusters, especially given the quality of some of the Japanese studios that worked on that show. Imagine that. But maybe you can see where this is all going. The introduction sequence to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is, much like the introduction sequence to Cops, a thing of beauty. Also, both introduction sequences share a few traits that were truly Peter Chung. And highlighting specific shots with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, this shot of April O'Neil, the Shredder tearing through the screen, and this extreme angle of the Turtles being dwarfed by the Technodrome just feel like the visual work of Peter Chung. As I say, even though I knew he was a character designer on the series, there was no mistaking that, there was still no way to really confirm it, but he had to have worked on the introduction sequence, right? And we arrive at 2021. Peter Chung had launched his Instagram account, and it was still very early days. Compared to now, as I type this in 2024, he didn't have too many followers. And so I took a chance and messaged him, rightly praising his work of course, asking him if he had worked on the introduction sequences to both Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Cops. His exact response? Comments like yours mean a lot to me. Yes, both of those title sequences were done by me. And there it was, Peter Chung storyboarded arguably one of the best introduction sequences during that decade in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But then it got even better. Peter Chung began posting his storyboards for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles introduction sequence, as well as some of his character design work for the show. We'll get to that, but right now let's break down his storyboards and compare them to the animated introduction sequence. Right from the very first storyboard, you can see that the layout artists and animators followed his visuals very closely. Even with this panel, you get a sense of atmosphere. Chung indicates that rather than a simple pan, speed lines should be used. This was often a risky strategy in animation, as not all studios could pull off speed lines effectively. Thankfully, in the final sequence, the camera pan is so perfectly timed that you cannot notice where the lines begin or end, and the illusion of one long sweeping camera move is created. The timing on this sequence of the manhole cover and the energy of the effects used really do honour what Peter Chung was clearly instructing with his panels. As soon as we see the turtles themselves, we can see that Peter Chung is taking inspiration from Kevin Eastman's illustrations for the characters with their pronounced beaks, something he would actually make evident with his character designs for the first 5 episodes. It's amazing to see these 2 storyboard panels knowing that this dark take was not what the animated series was planning, and yet the animated introduction sequence does its best to retain that dark feel by having the turtles in the shadows. And although not provided with a logo, my guess is that the marketing department at Playmates was still working on it, Peter Chung has the show's title evolve from a pool of goop. We next see the turtles in dramatic fashion as the roof of the turtle van opens to reveal them ready for action. This sequence of the turtle van exiting shot as the turtles are catapulted into the air is executed to perfection in the final sequence, with the instruction to animate the road being adhered to. And this right here is one of those iconic Peter Chung angles that I love talking about. The composition is fantastic on so many levels, and what this shot achieves as part of this introduction is great. With this panel, Chung introduces us to April O'Neil, and her look to the audience is almost a fourth wall break. However, not for 1 second does this shot pull us out of the introduction, as April is clearly looking back at her turtle allies who sail through the air. The fact that we can see the turtles in the side view mirror is a wonderful piece of composition. Also, notice the instructions on this storyboard panel. We have April turn her head, the turtles gain through the shot, the sky background behind the turtles move down, and the road in front of April animated. That's pretty much 4 levels of movement going on, and thankfully the animators did a stellar job bringing this shot to life. It appears that Peter Chung was planning to have the turtles gliding through the air and not drawing their weapons, unlike the final sequence. It could be that he later revised the panel, or it could be that the shot was altered during the layout stage. The shot of the turtles facing camera was again to show them weaponless, as Peter Chung was planning for that to be the reason we soon see each of their weapons in close-up. Funnily enough, when writing the script for this video, I only really clocked that the background in the final sequence does seem to move in the wrong direction, at least when compared to the logical storyboard instruction, although oddly it still works. We next see the 4 shots of the turtles' weapons being brandished. In his storyboards, Chung not only indicates the basic movement, but also in which direction the background speed line should pan. The final shots of the turtles readying their weapons are animated beautifully. And now we have Peter Chung's frankly terrifying Shredder. What a menace. I love the illustration of the villain lunging forward and then running over the camera with armed foot soldiers in pursuit. I would say that in the final sequence, Shredder's lunge towards the camera is kind of awkward, but it still looks great. With regards to these 4 panels that show each of the turtles dropping out of the sky, Chung's original illustrations really do suggest that this sequence is connected to the previous one of them being launched through the air, something that I don't believe is evident with the final introduction sequence due to the change of setting from night to dawn. Peter Chung's storyboard illustration for Donatello piloting the turtle blimp glider is fantastic. I would argue that the final sequence isn't as polished as what the artist initially envisioned. And now a highly memorable shot that was removed, like all scenes featuring nunchucks from the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles introduction, replaced with a random shot of Krang. See episode 3 of Serial Geek TV to learn more about that. The shot of Michelangelo displaying his nunchuck skills is animated beautifully, not only because of the timing, but the way in which they animate the nunchuck spinning. The secret of making a very static shot with lots of action look even better is with a simple camera move, in this case a slow truck in. And just in case you were wondering, Michelangelo uses his nunchucks to deflect a shuriken, a baseball, a grenade and a hammer. The amazing thing is, 4 of those objects are present in Chung's storyboards. Methinks he could have illustrated a banana and they would have included that too. Oh, what could have been. Next we have Hamato Yoshi becoming Splinter. Simple and effective. The final animated sequence goes all out with over-the-top poses and dramatic keyframes. I adore these panels which show Peter Chung's idea for how Splinter spins down and strikes all 4 sides of the wood structure at the same time. It's such a great piece of staging, and the end result is a brief but incredibly effective shot. And now we get a wonderfully hilarious panel which I think we can all say we are thankful was altered. In the original storyboard for Leonardo Leads, Peter Chung had Leonardo confronting a giant Krang, which is interesting given that I've always felt Krang's absence from the introduction was an odd choice, but check out the other turtles running for their lives. It's a genuinely hilarious visual, but I am thankful that we are treated to a far more dramatic and heroic shot of all 4 turtles with Leonardo directing them forward. Dushan, my partner in crime on this channel, suggested that maybe the reason for not having Krang in the introduction sequence was not to spoil the surprise of both the bodiless brain and the android body, which I think is a really valid point. The sequence showing Donatello and his machines is pretty much what we saw in the final sequence. The amazing thing is, if you compare the design of the animated machine, they pretty much followed Chung's design. It should be noted that in the final sequence, this shot marks the first real piece of humour in the introduction. I love these very loosely illustrated panels of Raphael because at their core, they show the key frames and the confidence that exudes throughout the sequence, culminating, of course, with the pizza covering the screen. Another thing that was changed, and it may be that Peter Chung only illustrated it as a joke, is that we see Michelangelo dancing away in a padded cell like he's insane, whereas in the final sequence he is, thankfully, busting moves on a proper dance floor. Great panels here showing the true depth of this shot, with each turtle passing the camera on a different level. The panel of the Technodrome towering over the turtles is quite possibly my favourite. It's like a piece of fine art. The composition is outstanding. It's almost a shame that the final sequence is so brief. I just love the use of blacks here. More on Raphael, less on Michelangelo, with barely any on Donatello and Leonardo. The final 3 panels of this action-packed introduction have the turtles pass by the camera, seemingly running towards the Technodrome rather than leaping up and out of shot as per the final sequence. Regardless, I think it's fair to say when looking at these panels that Peter Chung's vision was truly realised by the animators. Without a doubt, the original introduction sequence to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was one of the finest animated introductions of the 1980s. Not only did it feature energetic, action-packed scenes that flowed effortlessly from one shot to the next, but it also had the honour of having one of the best and most memorable theme songs too. The animation by Toei Doga was completely unique to the introduction, and as the series progressed it became far superior visually to the actual episodes themselves. Now let us take a brief look at some of Peter Chung's wonderful character designs for the series. Although there isn't much artwork in the way of the turtles, the previously seen storyboards pretty much showcase what Peter Chung's primary take on the hero's inner half shell was. We can see the turtles in some of the development artwork for the Turtle Van, Donatello here, Leonardo here, and all 4 turtles here. And for fun, the infamous turtle disguise, which, given Chung's beak design for the turtles, make it even less of a disguise. The model sheets for the disguises weren't revised when finalised, and you can see that the animators were just instructed to use the finalised animation model heads. Here is the final April O'Neil model sheet. And here is a look at Chung's frankly beautiful development artwork of the character. Some of the poses are just fantastic, a tad non-April O'Neil, but at the same time so wonderfully Peter Chung. These close-up facial expressions of April O'Neil, anyone I've ever shown these to absolutely falls in love with them. An early sketch that is also worth showcasing depicts April with overalls. Imagine a world without that yellow jumpsuit. Peter Chung's take on Hamato Yoshi was pretty much kept for the series, although the design appeared to be softened in later random appearances. I would say that Chung's Splinter is a lot less friendly looking. I mean, he is supposed to be a giant rat. Also, Dushan pointed out that Splinter kind of looks older here too. Possibly one of the most Peter Chung looking designs facially is Aruku Saki, who looks like Trevor Goodchild, the villain from Aeon Flux. The design was kept pretty much the same in the series, with some toning down of the features. Now, with regards to the Shredder, Peter Chung was absolutely looking at Kevin Eastman's artwork for inspiration here, as the pose and look of the character resembles the villain's first appearance in the comics. Amazingly, and I'm not even sure Chung himself would be aware of this incredibly early Shredder model would pop up on very early pieces of cartoon related merchandise. Again, very Peter Chung looking character designs for the human forms of Bebop and Rocksteady. Rocksteady was changed dramatically, but certain elements of Bebop's design were retained, even though the character was revised heavily to be broader. And finally, Krang. Of course, Krang kind of appears in the original comics, well, the Utroms do anyway, but the android body was completely Peter Chung's design from top to bottom. He once said that Krang's android body took shape from his original idea of it being based on a sumo, which actually makes all the sense in the world, given that Shredder is a ninja, so to have him aligned with a villain with an android sumo body, another Japanese fighting style, would make for an awesome and logical visual. That said, I still love Krang's final android body design in the show, which Chung has admitted was a bit of a joke. I should also mention that one of Peter Chung's earliest sketches has the android body looking like a mix of Andre the Giant and a masked luchador, with Krang himself appearing in the championship belt. Peter Chung's work on the series, those first 5 episodes, was accompanied by a wealth of artistic talent, including storyboard artists such as Larry Houston, Will Mineo and Carmoon Song. And the animation executed by numerous animation teams at the much celebrated on this channel Toei Doga Studio, it just all came together so perfectly. A group of talents coming together in 1987 to create something that went on to become a legitimate phenomenon, and it's awesome to know that Peter Chung was a part of that. And that's the end. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.